I'm Jessica Wilson, 27 years old, and I was finally feeling like my life was coming together. My career was taking off, and I thought it was time to reconnect with my family. So when my birthday rolled around, I headed to my parents' suburban home, excited to celebrate with everyone. The house was perfect as always, the food smelled amazing, and the family was all there. But when I asked the innocent question, "Where's my present?" my parents exchanged a cold look before my mother replied flatly, "We threw it in the trash." Before I tell you how my own parents could destroy my birthday so cruelly, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as we dive into the most painful birthday celebration of my life. I grew up in a picture-perfect house in a well-manicured neighborhood with parents who had very specific ideas about success. My mother, Linda Wilson, was the quintessential perfectionist. Every throw pillow had to be at the exact right angle, every meal had to look like it belonged in a magazine spread, and every child had to follow the prescribed path to success. She worked as a financial analyst before settling down to raise us, but she approached motherhood with the same precision and control she had applied to her career. My father, Robert Wilson, was equally demanding but in a more distant way. He was a corporate attorney who spent most of my childhood at the office or locked away in his home study. When he did emerge, it was usually to deliver critical assessments of our achievements or to lecture us about responsibility. Emotional warmth wasn't part of his parenting style. A pat on the shoulder was his version of a hug, and adequate work was his highest form of praise. I have one younger brother, Michael, who seemed to naturally fit into the mold our parents created. 3 years younger than me, he had the mathematical mind, the strategic thinking, and the practical ambition that made our parents beam with pride. He followed their carefully laid plans: prestigious private school, economics degree from an Ivy League university, and then straight into investment banking. He married Sarah, a dentist from a good family, had 2 perfect children right on schedule, and bought a house in the right neighborhood. I, on the other hand, was always the misfit. From the time I could hold a crayon, I was drawing on anything I could find. Elementary school teachers praised my creativity and artistic talent, but at home, these were considered cute hobbies at best, distractions from real studies at worst. "Art doesn't pay the bills, Jessica," my father would say whenever I showed him a drawing I was proud of. My mother was more subtle but equally dismissive. "That's nice, dear. Now let's work on your math homework. That's what's going to matter in life." Despite their constant redirection, my passion for art only grew stronger. In high school, I won several regional art competitions, but my parents didn't attend a single award ceremony. They were too busy at Michael's debate tournaments or math competitions, events they deemed worthy of their time. When college application season arrived, the tension reached a breaking point. I wanted to apply to art schools. They insisted on business programs. The arguments were endless. "We're not spending thousands of dollars for you to get a useless degree," my father declared one night after dinner. "Art is not useless," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's what I'm good at, it's what I love." "Love doesn't pay mortgages," he shot back. "Be practical for once in your life." In the end, we compromised, or at least that's what they called it. I would attend a university with a good business program, a could minor in art. What they didn't know was that I switched my major to graphic design during my sophomore year. I only told them after securing a scholarship that covered the remaining semesters. The look of disappointment on their faces still haunts me. After graduation, I spent 3 years building my portfolio while working at a small design agency. The pay was minimal, which my parents never failed to point out during our increasingly infrequent phone calls. Every conversation circled back to how well Michael was doing, how much money he was making, how secure his future. "Sarah's pregnant again," my mother announced during one call, not even bothering to ask about my life. "They're so blessed. If only you would consider a more stable career path, you might be able to start thinking about a family too." I learned to keep my struggles to myself and only share selective victories. When I landed my current position at Spectrum Creative, one of the most prestigious design firms in the city, I thought maybe finally I had something that would impress them. I was wrong. "Graphics on a computer? Isn't that something teenagers do for fun?" my father had commented. "At least it's steady employment, I suppose." Birthday celebrations in our family had always been formal affairs. My mother would prepare an elaborate meal. There would be a store-bought cake custom-ordered weeks in advance, and gifts would be practical items from a pre-approved list we were required to provide. As children, Michael and I quickly learned not to ask for toys or games. Appropriate gifts were educational books, clothing for special occasions, or savings bonds. The last birthday I'd spent with my family was 3 years ago, when I turned 24. I'd just started at my first design job and was struggling to make rent. My parents had given me a personal finance book and a lecture about financial responsibility. Michael received a Swiss watch for his birthday that same year. Despite all this, some desperate part of me still craved their approval. In the months leading up to this birthday, I had made more effort to reconnect. I called more regularly. I sent them links to major campaigns I had worked on. I even bought them an expensive wine basket for their anniversary, stretching my budget to do so. When they invited me for a birthday dinner, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe the distance had made them reconsider. Maybe my growing professional success had finally earned their respect. Maybe, just maybe, we could have the relationship I had always wanted. I should have known better. The morning of my birthday, I spent extra time getting ready. I chose a professional-looking blue dress that I thought would meet my mother's standards while still expressing my personal style. I curled my hair, applied subtle makeup, and even wore the pearl earrings they had given me for college graduation, one of the few gifts from them I actually liked. I had also prepared a small gift for them, a framed custom illustration I had created of their wedding photo. It had taken me weeks of evening work, carefully recreating the vintage photograph with modern digital techniques while preserving its nostalgic feel. I wrapped it in elegant silver paper with a navy blue bow, my father's favorite color combination. As I drove the 40 minutes to their suburban home, my stomach churned with the familiar mixture of hope and anxiety that always preceded family gatherings. My phone buzzed with birthday wishes from friends and colleagues, providing momentary distractions from my growing nervousness. "You got this, Jess," I whispered to myself as I turned onto the maple-lined street where I grew up. "They're just people. You're people, but still just people." My parents' house looked exactly as it always did, immaculately maintained with perfectly trimmed hedges and not a single weed daring to sprout in the pristine flower beds. The American flag hung precisely positioned by the front door, and the brass knocker gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was a stark contrast to my own apartment, with its colorful walls covered in artwork, comfortable mismatch furniture, and houseplants in creative containers. I parked behind my Aunt Diane's sensible sedan. At least she and Uncle Craig would be they. They had always been the softer, kinder versions of my parents, still successful and put together, but with an emotional warmth that my parents lacked. Aunt Diane was my mother's younger sister, and though they looked similar with their blonde bob haircuts and slender builds, Diane's eyes held a kindness that my mother's precision-focused gaze never did. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my purse and their gift and made my way to the front door. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal my mother, her critical gaze immediately sweeping over my appearance. "Jessica, happy birthday," she said, kissing near my cheek. "You're right on time for once. That dress is nice, though it could use ironing, and you've gained weight." "Hi, Mom," I replied, swallowing the retort that immediately sprang to mind. "Thanks for having me over." "Of course," she said, stepping back to let me in. "Everyone's in the living room. Your father just opened a bottle of Cabernet." The house smelled of roasting meat and furniture polished the scent of my childhood. I followed my mother through the immaculate foyer, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors that had always been off-limits for play. In the living room, Uncle Craig immediately stood to give me a warm hug. "There's the birthday girl," he exclaimed, his round face creased in a genuine smile. 27, can you believe it? I remember when you were just a little thing, always with crayon-stained fingers." "Don't remind me," my mother muttered, but Uncle Craig just winked at me. Aunt Diane embraced me next. "You look beautiful, Jessica, that color is perfect on you." My cousins, Emma and Tyler, both in their early 20s, offered casual happy birthdays from their position on the couch. They had always been caught in an awkward middle ground, too close to my age to be oblivious to the family dynamics, but too wary of their aunt and uncle to openly defy them by showing me too much support. My father emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand. "Jessica," he said with a nod, "happy birthday." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, holding out the gift I had brought. "This is for both of you, just a small token of appreciation." He looked momentarily surprised as he took the package. "That wasn't necessary." Your mother and I don't expect gifts from our children. I wanted to, I said simply. Before he could respond, the front door opened again and Michael's voice echoed through the house. Hello, we're here. And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. My mother's face lit up as she hurried to greet her favorite child. My father placed my gift on a side table without another word and went to help Michael with whatever he needed. Michael entered the living room carrying his 4-year-old son, James, while his wife Sarah followed with their 2-year-old daughter, Emma. They looked like they had stepped out of a catalog. Michael in a casual but clearly expensive button-down and khakis, Sarah in a tasteful dress, and the children in coordinating outfits. Hey sis, Michael said, giving me a one-armed hug while still holding his son. Happy birthday. Thanks, I replied, genuinely happy to see him despite everything. Michael and I had our issues, but he wasn't intentionally cruel. He had simply learned to play the game better than I had. Jessica, you remember Sarah, my mother said, as though I might have forgotten my sister-in-law of 6 years. Sarah gave me a tight smile. Happy birthday. The kids made you cards, but they're a little crushed from the car ride. I'm sure they're perfect, I said, bending down to greet my niece and nephew. At least the children still showed genuine excitement to see their artsy aunt, as Michael called me. As everyone settled into pre-dinner conversation, I found myself once again at the periphery of my own birthday celebration. My mother fluttered around Michael and his family, cooing over the grandchildren and asking detailed questions about Michael's recent promotion. My father poured Michael a glass of the expensive wine without being asked while discussing market trends. I sat beside Aunt Diane, who quietly asked about my latest project. I'm actually working on a major campaign for North Star Airlines, I told her, careful to keep my voice down. It's their complete brand overhaul, and they selected my concept from over 50 submissions. That's incredible, Aunt Diane said, squeezing my hand. You've always been so talented. Thanks, I replied, warmed by her genuine interest. It's a big deal for my career. The creative director said it could. Dinner's ready, my mother announced, cutting off our conversation. Everyone to the dining room. Michael, you and Sarah at this end near your father. As we moved to the dining room, I couldn't help but notice that while my name was on the birthday invitation, this celebration seemed to be about everyone but me. The dining room was a showcase of my mother's entertaining skills. The mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, set with the fine china that only emerged for special occasions. A floral centerpiece in muted blues and whites perfectly complemented the table linens. Place cards in my mother's elegant handwriting assigned each person their seat, with mine positioned directly across from Michael and Sarah rather than at the head of the table, where the birthday person would typically sit. My mother had outdone herself with the meal, as always. The spread included perfectly roasted beef tenderloin, scalloped potatoes arranged in a mandala-like pattern, asparagus spears tied in neat bundles, and a salad with carefully arranged components. Nothing was served family style. My mother plated each dish in the kitchen with restaurant-like precision. Linda, you've outdone yourself again, Uncle Craig said appreciatively as my mother served him. It's nothing special, she replied with practiced modesty. Just a simple family dinner. A simple dinner that had undoubtedly taken her days to plan and hours to execute, I thought but didn't say. That was my mother's way. Extraordinary effort presented as effortless perfection. As we began eating, the conversation predictably centered around Michael. My father raised his glass in a premature toast. I think we should acknowledge Michael's achievement, he announced. Being named youngest senior manager in his firm's history is no small feat. Everyone murmured congratulations while Michael adopted a look of humble pride. It's really just good timing and a lot of late nights, he said. The Henderson account was the real game changer. Don't be modest, my father continued. Your mother and I always knew you were destined for great things. I took a large sip of wine and caught Aunt Diane's sympathetic glance from across the table. This was supposed to be my birthday dinner, after all. Finding what seemed like a natural pause in the Michael appreciation segment, I cleared my throat. I actually have some good news too, I said. The North Star Airlines campaign I've been working on got approved by their CEO yesterday. It's going to be rolled out nationally next month. My mother nodded distractedly while serving more potatoes to my nephew. That's nice, dear. It's actually a pretty big deal, I continued, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. It's a multi-million-dollar campaign, and they chose my design concept over dozens of others. My creative director said it could be award-winning. Awards for computer drawings, my father asked skeptically. I suppose that's something. It's not just computer drawings, Dad, I said, feeling the familiar frustration rising. It's an entire brand strategy that includes digital and print media, commercial concepts, even architectural elements for their airport lounges. Sounds like a lot of work, Michael commented, not unkindly but with the faint condescension of someone who believes their field is inherently more valuable. Jessica has always been so creative, my mother said in the tone she reserved for discussing children's finger paintings. Remember that phase when you would make greeting cards for everyone? This is like that, but for a company. It's sweet. I gripped my fork tighter, fighting the urge to point out that my sweet career paid my bills and had recently landed me a promotion and substantial raise. Before I could respond, Uncle Craig jumped in. I'd love to hear more about the airline project, Jessica, he said. That sounds like a huge responsibility. How did you approach the concept? Grateful for his genuine interest, I began explaining the research and strategy behind the design, the challenges of respecting the company's heritage while modernizing their image. Jessica designed the most beautiful logo for our dental practice, Aunt Diane added. We still get compliments on it years later. You did their logo, Sarah asked, looking slightly impressed despite herself. I didn't realize that was you. For a brief moment, I felt a flash of validation. Maybe this dinner wouldn't be a complete emotional disaster after all. Speaking of Michael's promotion, my mother interrupted, effectively cutting off any further discussion of my career. Have you and Sarah decided about the private school options for James now that you can afford the tuition? And just like that, I was sidelined again. The rest of the meal continued in much the same fashion. Michael dominated the conversation with updates on his investment strategies, his children's developmental milestones, and plans for adding a pool to their backyard. My father asked detailed questions about Michael's company's expansion plans. My mother beamed with pride at every word her son spoke. I concentrated on eating the objectively delicious food, occasionally cashing sympathetic glances from Aunt Diane and Uncle Craig. My cousins remained mostly quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, a survival technique in our family gathering. After dinner came the cake, a professionally decorated two-tier creation in white and silver, with "Happy Birthday, Jessica" written in elegant script. As my mother carried it to the table, everyone began singing the traditional birthday song. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like a genuine celebration of my existence. The cake was sliced and served on the dessert plates that matched the dinner china. My mother had always insisted that birthdays require proper tableware, not paper plates or casual dishes. Open your gifts, Jessica, Aunt Diane suggested as we finished the cake. Yes, open ours first, Uncle Craig added, pushing a neatly wrapped package across the table. I carefully removed the wrapping paper, conscious of my mother's distaste for torn paper and scattered ribbons. Inside was a beautiful leather portfolio case with my initials embossed in the corner. This is gorgeous, I said, genuinely touched. Thank you both so much. We thought you could use it for presenting your designs to clients, Aunt Diane explained. The inside has special sleeves for artwork and a tablet compartment. It's perfect, I said, noticing the quality and thoughtfulness of the gift. My cousins had gone together to buy me a gift card to a high-end art supply store, along with a funny card that referenced an inside joke from our childhood. Michael and Sarah's gift was next, an expensive-looking scarf from a designer brand. Sarah picked it out, Michael said. She has the fashion sense in the family. It's beautiful, I said, admiring the silky fabric despite knowing I'd rarely wear something so conservative. Thank you both. As I looked around at the opened gifts, I realized my parents' gift was noticeably absent. In previous years, their practical gifts had at least made an appearance: the financial books, the sensible cookware, the gift cards to department stores with conservative clothing. The silence stretched awkwardly until I finally asked the question that would change everything. Mom, Dad, where's your present? The room fell silent. My mother's face hardened into a mask of disapproval, while my father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly very interested in adjusting his watch strap. Michael shot them a questioning look, clearly unaware of whatever was about to unfold. Where's my present? I repeated, my voice smaller now, already regretting the question. My mother exchanged a look with my father before turning to me with cold eyes. We threw it in the trash. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. What? You heard me, she said, folding her napkin with precise movements. We purchased something, but upon reflection, we decided it wasn't appropriate. So we disposed of it. I looked to my father, hoping for some clarification, some softening of this bizarre statement, but he merely nodded in agreement. I don't understand, I said slowly, feeling every eye at the table on me. You bought me a birthday gift and then threw it away. Why would you do that? My mother sighed, as though explaining something obvious to a slow child. We initially purchased a set of professional art supplies. That new store at the mall had a special display, and the sales associate assured us they were high quality. But then we thought better of it, my father interjected. We realized we'd be encouraging your wasteful hobby. My wasteful hobby, I repeated, the words not fully computing. You mean my career? The professional work I do that pays my bills and just landed me a major national campaign. Jessica, my mother said sharply, let's not make a scene. Your father and I simply cannot support you throwing your life away on drawing pictures when you could be building a real career with your business minor. The room spun slightly as the full impact of their words hit me. They had bought me a thoughtful gift, probably the first one in years, that acknowledged my passion and talent, and then deliberately thrown it away to make a point. On my birthday. In front of the entire family. I'm not throwing my life away, I said, my voice trembling. I'm building a successful career doing something I love and am good at. Something that many people would kill to achieve. Doodling on a computer is hardly a career worth sacrificing stability for, my father said dismissively. Michael was younger than you when he made manager, and he's already secured his family's future. This isn't about Michael, I exclaimed, louder than I intended. This is about you throwing away a gift for me on my birthday to punish me for not living the exact life you planned. Don't raise your voice at your mother, my father warned. Why not? I shot back, years of suppressed frustration finally boiling over. You just told me to my face that you threw my present in the garbage because you don't respect my life choices on my birthday, in front of everyone. And I'm supposed to respond calmly. Perhaps we should have this conversation privately, my mother suggested, glancing nervously at the uncomfortable faces around the table. No, I said firmly, you chose to humiliate me publicly, so we can have this conversation publicly. Do you have any idea how cruel what you just did is? Cruel, my mother repeated incredulously. We've supported you through years of poor decisions. We paid for your education. Half of it, I corrected. I got scholarships for the rest after you threatened to cut me off for changing my major. Because you went behind our backs, my father interjected. We had an agreement. I was 20 years old, I had the right to choose my own path. And look where that path has led you, my mother said with a disdainful sweep of her hand. Living in that tiny apartment, working always for less money than your brother made his first year out of college, no prospects for marriage or family. I love my apartment, I love my job, and I'm dating someone, not that you've bothered to ask, I retorted. Just because my life doesn't match your narrow definition of success doesn't mean it's not valuable. Linda Robert, Aunt Diane interjected gently. I think Jessica has a point. She's built a life she's proud of, and that's worth celebrating. Stay out of this, Diane, my mother snapped. You've always encouraged her impracticality. No, she's encouraged my talent, I corrected. Unlike my own parents, who just admitted to throwing away a gift rather than support their daughter's passion. It wasn't just about the art supplies, my father said, his voice rising. It was about sending a message. It's time to grow up, Jessica, time to stop playing around with drawings and build something real. I laughed bitterly. A message? Well, message received loud and clear. You've never supported me and you never will. That's not fair, my mother protested. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I said, standing up from the table. You've always wanted what you think is best for me. You've never once asked what I want or recognized my achievements on my terms. Jessica, please sit down, Michael attempted, looking uncomfortable with the confrontation. Why? I challenged him. So we can go back to talking about your promotion and your perfect life while pretending my parents didn't just tell me they literally threw my birthday present in the garbage. You're overreacting, my father said dismissively. Am I asked, turning to the rest of the family. Is it an overreaction to be upset that my parents bought me a gift and then threw it away to punish me for my career choice, on my birthday? Uncle Craig shook his head. Robert, Linda, I have to agree with Jessica, that was unnecessarily hurtful. This is ridiculous, my mother said, standing as well. We're your parents. We have a responsibility to guide you toward better choices. I'm 27 years old, I exclaim. I don't need your guidance anymore. What I needed was your support, but clearly that was too much to ask for. We've supported you plenty, my father argued. Who helped you move into your first apartment? Who loaned you money when your car broke down 2 years ago? And you've never let me forget it, I replied. Every interaction, every phone call, every family gathering has been peppered with reminders of how I'm failing to live up to your expectations while Michael gets praised just for existing. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. Name one time you've expressed genuine pride in my accomplishments without comparing me to Michael or adding a caveat about how I could be doing better. The silence that followed was answer enough. I think, I said, gathering my purse and the gifts from my aunt, uncle, and cousins, that this birthday dinner is over. Thank you all for coming, but I can't stay here any longer. Jessica, don't be dramatic, my mother said sharply. I'm not being dramatic, I replied, my voice steadier now. I'm setting a boundary. I won't sit here and be insulted and belittled on what's supposed to be a celebration of my life. I turned to leave, then paused, remembering the gift I had brought them. I walked to the side table where my father had abandoned it and picked it up. This was for both of you, I said, holding the silver-wrapped package. I spent weeks creating a custom illustration of your wedding photo. I thought it might help bridge the gap between us. But I don't think anything will ever be enough for you. I placed the package back on the table and headed for the door. Jessica, wait, Aunt Diane called, following me. Don't drive when you're this upset. I'll be fine, I assured her, though tears were already blurring my vision. I just need to get out of here. This is exactly the kind of impulsive, emotional behavior we're talking about, my father called after me, running away instead of facing reality. I paused at the front door and turned back one last time. I'm not running away from reality, Dad. I'm walking away from toxicity. There's a difference. With that, I stepped out into the evening air, closed the door behind me, and let the tears fall freely as I headed to my car, leaving behind not just a ruined birthday but the last shreds of hope for the relationship I'd always wanted with my parent. The drive home passed in a blur. I don't remember the turns I took or the lights I stopped at. I only remember the crushing weight on my chest and the tears that wouldn't stop falling. I pulled over twice when the crying made it impossible to see the road. By the time I reached my apartment, my eyes were swollen, and my carefully applied makeup was streaked across my face. I stumbled through my front door and collapsed onto my couch, curling into a ball as sobs racked my body. The beautiful blue dress I had chosen so carefully was crumpled and tear-stained. The pearl earrings, the gift I had worn to please them, felt heavy and foreign, and I yanked them off, dropping them on the coffee table with a clatter. My phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming calls and messages, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. What was there to say? What magical combination of words could possibly repair what had just happened? Eventually, when the initial wave of emotion had subsided enough for me to function, I changed into comfortable clothes, washed my face, and checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Aunt Diane, 2 from Uncle Craig, 1 from my cousin Emma, and even 1 from Michael. My parents hadn't called. There were also several text messages. From Aunt Diane: Jessica, we're so sorry about what happened. That was inexcusable. Please call when you're ready. We love you. From Uncle Craig: checking if you got home safe. Your parents were out of line. Call us. From Emma: that was messed up. You okay? From Michael: hey sis, that was rough. Parents are being stubborn as usual. Let me know if you need anything. No messages from my parents. No apology. No acknowledgement of how deeply they had hurt me. I texted Aunt Diane to let her know I was home safely but couldn't talk yet. I thanked Uncle Craig for his concern and promised to call tomorrow. I sent brief replies to Emma and Michael, then turned off my phone. I couldn't handle any more family drama tonight. The next morning, I woke up with puffy eyes and a hollowness in my chest. It was Saturday, and under normal circumstances, I might have called my mother to debrief about the party, to thank her for hosting. But those normal circumstances existed in some parallel universe where parents didn't throw their children's birthday presents in the trash to make a point. I made coffee and sat by my apartment window, watching the city come to life below. The morning sunlight illuminated my living room walls, covered in framed artwork, some of my own creations, others from artist friends and local art fairs. My home was colorful, creative, and warm, everything my parents' house was not. It was a physical manifestation of the life I had built for myself, despite their disapproval. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was Amber, my best friend since college. "Happy birthday, Aftermath," she said when I answered. "How was the family dinner from hell?" "Even worse than expected," I replied, and found myself pouring out the entire story. "They did what?" Amber exclaimed when I got to the part about the trashed present. "That is next-level emotional manipulation, Jess. That's not just being unsupportive, that's deliberately cruel." "I know," I said, tears threatening again. "The thing is, part of me is still wondering if I overreacted by leaving." "Are you kidding me?" Amber's voice rose in indignation. "They humiliated you in front of your entire family on your birthday. They literally threw your present in the garbage to make some twisted point about your career choices. You didn't overreact. If anything, you were remarkably restrained." Her validation helped, but the familiar pattern of doubt and self-blame was hard to break. For years, I had been conditioned to question my own reactions, to accommodate my parents' behavior, to be the one who compromised to keep the peace. "I keep thinking about all the birthdays growing up," I said softly. "The way they would always give Michael these thoughtful gifts that aligned with his interests, while I got practical things that aligned with what they wanted me to be interested in. How did I not see the pattern sooner?" "Because they're your parents," Amber replied gently. "We all want to believe our parents love and accept us unconditionally. It takes time to recognize when that's not the case." Over the next week, I cycled through a range of emotions. There were days of intense anger when I drafted scathing emails to my parents that I never sent. There were days of profound sadness when I mourned the relationship we never had and now probably never would. There were even moments of doubt when I wondered if they were right, if I had made a mistake by pursuing a creative career instead of something more conventionally successful. During one particularly low moment, I found myself scrolling through job listings for corporate marketing positions, jobs that would fit my parents' definition of real work, when an email notification appeared on my screen. It was from the creative director at my firm. "Jessica, the North Star CEO just called. They're thrilled with the campaign concept and want to fast-track the rollout. He specifically mentioned your fresh perspective and innovative approach. This is huge. Let's meet Monday to discuss your expanded role on this project." I stared at the screen, a strange laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. Here was validation from the professional world, from people who actually understood and valued my work, arriving at the exact moment I was questioning my choices. That evening, I called Amber again. "I think I need to go to therapy," I said without preamble when she answered. "Because of your parents?" she asked. "Yes, I realized today that even after everything that happened, even after they literally threw my present in the trash, part of me is still seeking their approval. I was actually looking at corporate jobs today, Amber, jobs I would hate, just to earn their respect. That's not healthy." "No, it's not," she agreed. "Therapy sounds like a good idea." I found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and booked an appointment for the following week. In our first session, I explained what had happened at the birthday dinner. "What strikes me," the therapist said after listening, "is how long you've been trying to win your parents' approval while simultaneously building a life that aligns with your own values. Those are conflicting goals in your situation." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Based on what you've told me, your parents don't just disapprove of your career. They fundamentally don't value creativity the way you do. They see art as frivolous, while you see it as essential. That's not just a disagreement about career paths. It's a fundamental difference in values. You cannot simultaneously be true to yourself and meet their expectations because those things are mutually exclusive." Her words hit me like a physical force. All these years, I had been trying to find some magical middle ground that didn't exist. I had been seeking approval from people who, by their very nature, could not approve of the authentic me. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice small. "You start by accepting that you may never get their approval, and that's okay," she replied. "Your worth isn't determined by their validation. Then you set boundaries that protect your emotional well-being while leaving room for whatever relationship is possible given those limitations." Over the following weeks, I worked with my therapist to process decades of conditional love and approval. I began to understand how deeply my parents' attitudes had affected my self-worth, how I had internalized their criticism to the point where I was my own harshest judge. I also made a difficult decision. I would take a break from contact with my parents. I sent them a brief, clear email explaining that I needed space to process what had happened and that I would reach out when I was ready. I didn't ask for an apology or explanation. I simply set a boundary. My mother replied with a terse message about how I was always so sensitive and how they were just trying to help. My father didn't respond at all. Their reactions only confirmed that I was making the right choice. During this time, I strengthened my relationships with the family members who did support me. Aunt Diane and Uncle Craig invited me to dinner regularly. Cousins and I reconnected over drinks and game nights. Even Michael made an effort, meeting me for coffee and really listening when I explained how hurtful our parents' favoritism had been. I never realized how different it was for you, he admitted. They were strict with me too, but in a different way. They pushed me, but at least it was towards something I already wanted. Exactly, I said. They tried to make me want different things. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into my work with renewed focus. Without the constant background anxiety of seeking parental approval, I found myself more creative, more confident in my ideas. The North Star campaign progressed rapidly, with each component receiving enthusiastic client approval. And then, exactly 1 month after my disastrous birthday dinner, something unexpected happened. I designed concept for North Star won a prestigious industry award for innovative branding. My name was announced at a major conference, and I was invited to give a short acceptance speech in front of hundreds of industry professionals. As I stood at the podium, looking out at a room full of people who understood and valued exactly the kind of work my parents had dismissed as a hobby, I felt something shift inside me. This was my world. These were my people. This was success on my terms. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't immediately think about how to explain this achievement to my parents in terms they might finally respect. Instead, I simply allowed myself to feel proud. That night, scrolling through congratulatory messages on my phone, I came across an old photo from my childhood, me at maybe 8 years old, holding up a drawing with a huge, gap-toothed smile. I remembered that day. I had drawn our family house, and my art teacher had praised it so highly that I couldn't wait to show my parents. I remembered my father's distracted nod, my mother's quick, "That's nice, dear," before they returned to discussing Michael's math test. Looking at that photo, I realized something profound. That little girl with the gap-toothed smile and the passionate love for creating didn't need to earn her parents' approval. She was already whole, already worthy, already enough, and so was I. The industry award became a catalyst for change in both my professional and personal life. My creative director promoted me to senior designer with a substantial raise, and I was given more autonomy in selecting projects. For the first time, I felt truly valued for the skills and perspective I brought to the table. With my increased income, I decided it was time to make some changes to my living space as well. My apartment had always been a reflection of my creative spirit, but parts of it still held echoes of my college days, makeshift furniture and temporary solutions that had become permanent through inertia and tight budgets. I began the transformation with a fresh coat of paint in the living room, a rich, warm blue that made my artwork pop against the walls. I invested in a comfortable new sofa to replace the secondhand one I'd had since graduation. I built custom shelving for my design books and art supplies, creating an organized workspace that still allowed for creative freedom. Each change, though seemingly superficial, represented a deeper shift in how I valued myself and my environment. I wasn't just decorating. I was creating a sanctuary that honored both my professional identity and personal taste. "This place looks amazing," Amber commented when she came over for dinner 6 weeks after my birthday debacle. "It feels more intentional." "That's exactly it," I agreed, pouring us each a glass of wine. "I'm being more intentional about everything these days." The intentionality extended beyond my physical space. With guidance from my therapist, I began examining other relationships in my life, identifying patterns that mirrored my dynamics with my parents. I realized I had a tendency to befriend people who were subtly critical, who made me work for their approval, who never quite accepted me as I was. "It's not surprising," my therapist explained. "We often recreate familiar dynamics, even painful ones, because they feel normal to us. Breaking those patterns requires conscious effort." I made that effort. I stepped back from friendships that left me feeling drained or diminished. I opened myself to new connections with people who appreciated my creativity and unique perspective. I even started dating again, this time with clear boundaries and expectations. Throughout this period, I maintained my distance from my parents. 2 months of no contact stretched into 3. Occasionally, my mother would send a text that skated around the edge of an apology without ever quite getting there. "Your father and I have been thinking about you, hope work is going well." Or, "Saw an article about graphic design in the Sunday paper. Made me think of you." I acknowledged these messages politely but briefly, without being drawn into deeper conversation. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about protecting myself while I strengthened my sense of self-worth independent of their validation. My relationship with other family members flourished during this time. Aunt Diane and I developed the Sunday morning ritual of meeting for coffee and gallery browsing. Uncle Craig asked for my help redesigning the branding for his dental practice. My cousins invited me to their game nights and beach trips, no longer worried about taking sides in family drama. Even Michael made efforts to repair our relationship, though it was complicated by his close ties to our parents. He called regularly, making a point to ask about my work and actually listen to the answers. During one such call, he surprised me. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began hesitantly, "about Mom and Dad treating us differently." "And," I prompted. "You were right," he admitted. "I didn't see it before because, well, I was the favorite. It was comfortable. But since your birthday, I've been paying more attention. They do have this narrow view of success, and I just happen to fit into it naturally." "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, genuinely moved by his insight. "It means a lot." "I've tried talking to them about it," he continued. "Dad just shuts down, but Mom, I think she might be starting to get it. A little, anyway." I appreciated his efforts but didn't allow myself to hope too much. My healing couldn't depend on my parents' recognition of their behavior. As my professional confidence grew, I began taking on freelance projects in addition to my full-time job. One of these projects was particularly meaningful, designing a series of illustrated children's books about young girls pursuing various careers, from science to sports to, yes, art. "I want these books to show kids that there are many different paths to success," the author explained during our initial meeting. "That following your passion isn't just valid, it's valuable." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, using my wasteful hobby to help create stories that might prevent other children from experiencing the kind of dismissal I had grown up with. As I worked on the illustrations, depicting girls with paintbrushes and telescopes and soccer balls, I thought about what I would tell my childhood self if I could send a message back in time. I would tell her that her passion wasn't something to apologize for or hide. That her way of seeing the world was a gift, not a defect. That she was already enough, exactly as she was. This reflection led me to write a letter not to my childhood self, but to my parents. I didn't send it immediately. I worked on it over several weeks, revising with the help of my therapist to ensure it expressed my feelings clearly without slipping into accusation or blame. The final version read, "Dear Mom and Dad, it's been 3 months since my birthday dinner. I've taken this time to reflect on our relationship and what I need moving forward. I'm writing not to rehash the past or place blame, but to express my feelings honestly and establish some boundaries for the future. When you told me you had thrown away my birthday present because it would encourage my wasteful hobby, it hurt deeply. It felt like a rejection not just of my career choice, but of me as a person, my values, my passions, my way of seeing the world. This wasn't an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of feeling that I could never measure up to your expectations, no matter my achievement. I want you to know that I am proud of the life I've built. My career in graphic design isn't a hobby or a phase, it's a profession I've worked hard at, one that challenges me creatively and intellectually. In the past 3 months, I've won an industry award, been promoted, and taken on exciting new projects that allow me to make a positive impact through my work. I understand that this path wouldn't have been your choice for me. I know you wanted security and conventional success, and I believe those concerns came from a place of love. But I need you to understand that there are many valid definitions of success, and mine is different from yours or Michael's. Moving forward, I would like to have a relationship with you, but it needs to be one based on mutual respect. I cannot continue pretending to be someone I'm not or apologizing for the choices that make me happy. If we are to rebuild our connection, I need you to accept me as I am, creative career, colorful apartment, and all. I'm open to talking when you're ready, but with the understanding that my professional choices are not up for debate or criticism. My life path is my own to determine. With love, Jessica. After finalizing the letter, I didn't immediately send it. Instead, I placed it in a drawer, knowing it would be there when the time felt right. The act of writing it had been therapeutic in itself, helping me articulate boundaries I had struggled to establish for years. As the holiday season approached, bringing with it the inevitable family gatherings, I knew I would need to make decisions about how to engage with my parents. The letter would be my guide, whether or not I actually shared it with them. In the meantime, I continued focusing on my own growth. I joined a community art studio where I could explore purely creative projects separate from my commercial work. I started volunteering, teaching art classes at a local youth center. I expanded my social circle, making friends who knew me only as I was now, not as the person my parents had tried to shape me into. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly autonomous, not defined by rebellion against my parents' expectations or by desperate attempts to earn their approval, but by my own choices and values. The transformation wasn't instantaneous or complete, but it was real and ongoing. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on illustrations for the children's book, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source: my father. "Your mother and I would like to talk, when you're ready." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even particularly warm. But it was an opening, and I had prepared for this moment. I took a deep breath, looked around at the life I had built, and replied, "I'm free this Saturday afternoon. There's a cafe near my apartment called the Blue Door. 2 p.m. would work for me." Setting the meeting on my terms, in neutral territory, was a small but significant act of self-advocacy. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as the approval-seeking daughter desperate for validation, but as a whole person comfortable in her own skin and clear about her boundary. The transformation wasn't just in how I decorated my apartment or how I approached my work. It was in how I carried myself, how I valued my own voice, how I allowed myself to take up space in the world without apology. It was in the knowledge that regardless of how my parents responded, I was enough. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn air and golden afternoon light. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but creative, polished but true to my personal style. A geometrically patterned dress in jewel tones, comfortable but stylish boots, and a simple silver necklace that had been a gift from Aunt Diane. I wanted to look put together without seeming like I was trying too hard to impress my parent. The Blue Door Cafe was one of my favorite spots in the city, a cozy establishment with local art on the walls and mismatched vintage furniture. I arrived 15 minutes early to secure a quiet corner table away from the main traffic flow. As I waited, I sipped a latte and reviewed mental notes from my last therapy session. "Remember, this meeting isn't about getting them to apologize or validate your choices," my therapist had advised. "It's about establishing new patterns of interaction. Stay grounded in your worth regardless of how they respond." At precisely 2 p.m., my parents walked through the door. My mother looked as immaculate as ever in a tailored pantsuit, not a hair out of place. My father wore his standard business casual weekend attire khakis and a button-down shirt. They looked somehow both familiar and like strangers. I stood to greet them, accepting my mother's stiff hug and my father's awkward shoulder pat. We exchanged pleasantries about the weather and the cafe as they settled into their seats and ordered coffee. Once the server departed, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I waited, determined not to rush in to fill the void as I would have in the past. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "You look well, Jessica." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I'm well." Another beat of silence. "We've been concerned," my mother began. 3 months is a long time without proper communication." I nodded but didn't apologize. I needed that time to process what happened and think about what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. My mother's lips tightened slightly. "I think you overreacted to what was simply parental concern." And there it was, the same dismissal of my feelings, the same refusal to acknowledge harm done. In the past, this would have been my cue to backpedal, to apologize for being too sensitive, to smooth things over at my own expense. Not today. "What happened at my birthday dinner wasn't concern," I said calmly. Throwing away a gift to make a point about disapproving of my career was deliberately hurtful. And it wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of treating my choices and achievements as less valuable than Michael's. My father shifted uncomfortably. We never meant to compare you to your brother. Intent doesn't change impact, I replied, using a phrase my therapist had taught me. The comparison was constant, whether you meant it to be or not. My mother looked like she wanted to argue but instead took a careful sip of her coffee. We only want what's best for you. I know you believe that, I acknowledge. But what you think is best for me and what actually makes me happy and fulfilled are different things. I need you to understand that I'm not going to change careers or become the daughter you wanted me to be. My life is on a different path. This isn't about your job, my mother insisted. It's about stability and security. My job provides both, I countered. I was recently promoted to senior designer. I have health insurance, a retirement plan, and savings. I'm doing well professionally and personally. My father looked genuinely surprised. A promotion? You didn't mention that. There's a lot I haven't mentioned because I learned early on that my achievements in this field aren't considered real achievements in your eye. A heavy silence fell over the table. My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice softer than before. Perhaps we have been rigid in our thinking. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall of certainty they had built around their worldview. I brought something to show you, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a magazine, the latest issue of Design Edge, which featured a spread on the North Star Airlines rebranding, including my name and an interview about my creative process. My father took the magazine, adjusting his reading glasses as he and my mother leaned in to examine the pages. I watched their faces as they read, looking for any sign of genuine recognition. This is impressive, my father admitted, studying the before and after images of the airline's visual identity. Very professional. It is, I agreed, because I am a professional. This isn't doodling or playing around. This is strategic creative work that impacts a company's bottom line. My mother's fingers traced over my name in the byline. For a moment, her carefully maintained facade slipped, and I caught a glimpse of something that might have been pride. I'm not showing you this to seek your approval, I continued. I'm showing you to help you understand my reality. This is the world I live in, the field where I excel. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on respect for the life I've actually built, not disappointment about the life you wanted me to build. My mother folded her hands on the table. And if we can't do that, then we'll continue to have a very limited relationship, I said simply. I won't subject myself to constant criticism or dismissal anymore. I've worked too hard on my self-worth to let it be undermined, even by my parents. My directness seemed to surprise them. In the past, I would have hedged, accommodated, compromised. The Jessica sitting across from them now was different, clear about her boundaries, secure in her. We don't want a limited relationship, my father said after a moment. Then something needs to change, I replied. And it won't be my career or my values. What followed was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had as a family. There were difficult moments, my mother's defensiveness flaring up, my father retreating into stoic silence, but there were also breakthroughs. They listened, really listened, as I explained how their treatment had affected me throughout my life. I listened too, hearing about their own parents' strict expectations, their genuine fears about financial insecurity based on their own upbringings. I'm not asking for a perfect relationship overnight, I concluded as our meeting drew to a close. Just a willingness to try something different, to see me for who I am rather than who you wished I would be. My mother nodded slowly. We can try, she said, which from her was tantamount to a major concession. We parted with tentative plans for dinner the following month, not at their house with its loaded history, but at a neutral restaurant where we could continue building this new, more honest dynamic. 6 months later, I celebrated my next birthday quietly with friends at my apartment. There was no formal family dinner, no passive-aggressive comments, no disappointment. Instead, there was laughter, genuine conversation, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was. The day after my small celebration, I received a package in the mail. It was from my parents. Inside was a set of professional-grade art supplies not unlike the ones they had thrown away a year earlier and a card that read simply, "Happy birthday, we're learning, love, Mom and Dad." It wasn't a complete transformation. There were still awkward moments, still times when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But it was progress, genuine, halting progress. The real gift that year, though, wasn't the art supplies or even my parents' tentative steps toward acceptance. It was the gallery showing of my personal work that opened that same week. After years of focusing on commercial design, I had finally created a series of illustrations that were purely for artistic expression, vibrant, emotional pieces that captured my journey from seeking external validation to finding inner strength. I hadn't expected my parents to attend the opening. I hadn't even told them about it, not wanting to set myself up for disappointment. But halfway through the evening, as I was explaining my process to an interested collector, I looked up to see them standing uncertainly at the gallery entrance. My father, looking uncomfortable but determined in a suit that seemed too formal for the artsy crowd. My mother, clutching her purse tightly as she surveyed the room with wide eyes. They looked out of place, but they were there. As I approached them, my father cleared his throat. "The colors are vibrant," he offered awkwardly. "They are," I agreed with a small smile. My mother surprised me by reaching out to touch my arm. "I found something recently when I was cleaning out the attic," she said, opening her purse to withdraw a small folder. "I thought you might want these." Inside were drawings I had made as a child, colorful, imaginative scenes carefully preserved despite my parents' apparent dismissal of my artistic pursuits. My mother had kept them all these years, a silent acknowledgement of the passion they had openly discouraged. "You saved them," I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes. "Of course I did," she replied softly. "You are always so talented." It wasn't a complete healing of all past wounds. It wasn't a perfect resolution or a Hollywood ending. But it was real, a genuine moment of connection that acknowledged both the past hurt and the possibility of a different future. As I guided my parents through the gallery, explaining my work to them in terms they could understand, I realized that the most valuable lesson from this painful year wasn't about them at all. It was about me, about learning to define my own worth, to set healthy boundaries, to build a life that honored my authentic self regardless of external validation. The most important gift I gave myself wasn't the promotion or the award or even the gallery showing. It was permission to throw away toxic expectations, to metaphorically toss in the trash the limiting beliefs and harmful patterns that had held me back for so long. Just as my parents had literally thrown away my present, I had figuratively thrown away the need for their approval to feel complete. And in doing so, I had created space for something new and healthier to grow, not just in my relationship with them, but in my relationship with myself. This journey taught me that sometimes we need to discard old patterns before we can create new ones. That healing isn't linear, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That family relationships can evolve and transform, even after decades of dysfunction, if all parties are willing to do the difficult work. Most importantly, I learned that while we can't choose the family we're born into, we can choose how we respond to them, how we allow them to affect us, and what role they played in our adult lives. We can choose to define success on our own terms, to surround ourselves with people who celebrate rather than diminish us, to create a life that feels authentic rather than approved. So if you're struggling with family members who can't see your worth, who throw away your dreams or dismiss your path, remember, you have the power to decide what you'll accept, what you'll discard, and what you'll create in its place. Your value isn't determined by their validation. Your success isn't measured by their standards. Your life is yours to design. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't accept your choices? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below to share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more authentic stories about navigating difficult relationships, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the trash is exactly where certain expectations belong.